What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Miko, here with Morgan, and we actually have a special guest today. The machine himself, Erik Schlitt, is graced us with his presence. Erik, we appreciate you taking the time to kind of join us on this very special draft conversation tonight.
Yeah, that's very kind of you. I've been waiting to get on. You guys are doing awesome, and however I can support that, I want to do it. So let's have some fun.
Yeah, speaking of support, you've been doing an awesome job, obviously supporting. It sounds weird saying supporting POD because you're so much a part of everything that we do around here. But
Sure.
If you guys haven't, like, as the viewers, if you guys haven't had a chance to check out Erik's other podcast, Detroit Lions Breakdown. He's been having a couple of special guests from the POD crew over there. Morgan was on there recently. I actually got to catch that episode. My bad. But Ryan Matthews has also been on there a couple episodes. So
good.
I'm just waiting for my opportunity. That's all. Just gonna wait for my opportunity.
I'm gonna get you. I haven't got Jeremy on either. We're still trying to work the details out because I'm still doing my main show with my podcast partner Joe, and then so that one takes quite a bit of time. We're trying to keep these shows shorter as a way to supplement, I guess, the lack of podcasts that POD was putting out, and I'm trying to keep it just to POD staff and just give our staff more voices. There's a lot of red tape that we're still cutting through with the actual POD podcast itself, and so we're trying to work through that. And then in the interim, it's draft season, man. So we're trying to put it, we're trying to put smaller content, smaller shows out there. And it's just, Morgan and I we weren't successful in keeping it under 30 minutes. So that's more my fault. But still, we're trying to keep it more short and consumable because I know the Lions fan base is just, they have a very strong appetite for Lions content. And this is the time of the year that it's chock full of stuff.
Well, I mean, I know I speak for everybody a part of the staff when I say, like, we appreciate you taking the time to even help, everybody's voices continue to get out there. And when I do get my opportunity, I will make sure not to let you down and go over 30 minutes as well. I will be just as long-winded. But speaking
y'all's is going to be like an hour. Y'all's is going to be an hour for sure.
I'm going to try so hard to just shut the hell up and just let Erik talk. But speaking of which, all right, like you said, Erik, it's draft season. The draft is next week. There's so many other topics that I feel like we haven't got to cover as a staff. And one of the ones that Morgan and I were having a lot of passionate conversations about on the side. And we were just like, you know what? If we have this conversation by ourselves, it may be too one-sided. So we wanted to have someone else come in and provide much better insight from the other side of it. And that's on the draft prospect, Cooper DeJean, cornerback out of Iowa. He is somebody that I can say for myself, when I originally started hearing people talk about him as possibly CB1 in this class or CB2 in this class, I just kind of couldn't believe it. And I'm not going to lie. It's because he was a white corner, and I just didn't understand how this was happening in the year 2024. So, Erik, let's start there. Tell me how wrong I am about Cooper DeJean and why he is and should be seen as one of the top 1 to even 3, possibly as low as 3 corners in this class.
Yeah, when you look at DeJean's arc to where he is now, he played some safety in high school, so he got I believe a recruiting rating as a safety, and then he shows up at Iowa and they're talking about using him at safety, but then when they uncover his athleticism, they realize he's better at outside corner, and so they start using him at outside corner more. Well, with their zone heavy scheme, they realize that his instincts and intangibles together make a very formidable defender, and so they started moving him around. He got some snaps technically at safety, which is basically like in their slot type role. So he's got range to kick inside. But he's got 4.4 speed, so he sticks on the outside. He's got good athleticism. And Iowa's scheme doesn't do him any favors because they operate out of a zone. They try and keep everything in front of him. Iowa's scheme is basically we don't have the athletes to keep up with everybody else, so we're going to keep everything in front of us, and then we're just going to play sound defense and wait for you to make a mistake. And it's worked very well for Iowa. That's why they have multiple games last season that no one broke double digits, and so it's just terrible football overall, like for the viewer, hard to watch. But the defense has always been pretty good, and DeJean is the headliner of that. And there's so many little intangibles about DeJean's game that I think make him unique and make him part of the top of this class conversation, because he obviously is very comfortable in zone. His instincts put him in really good position all the time. He can make plays on the ball. He converts plays when they are within his reach. He makes turnovers. He's an aggressive player, so he ends up making a lot of tackles. And again, everything at Iowa has to be very technically sound in order for the defense to operate properly. And so everything he does is technically sound. And so you've got a fast corner who's technically sound. He's physical and a strong tackler, and he's got good instincts that always put himself in the right position, and he's got ball skills. Now, that's just defense. He's day one could be your starting gunner. Day one could be your starting kick returner. And with the new kick return rules that they have, he could be the guy on day one, because he's got instincts and he understands vision. He has good vision. He sees where things are happening, and like I said, he has an overall aggression to him that comes out when the football's in his hands. So all these different intangibles make Cooper DeJean a very, very appealing player for any NFL team. But then when you add in, the grit, the position versatility, there's so many boxes that he's going to check for what the Lions like. And so for me, I absolutely love him. I love him for the Lions. If he's there, it's a no-brainer for me. I say it would be hard to pass on him if he's there.
For sure. And I know, Morgan, when you and I were talking, there was one thing that really kind of kept coming up whenever you were talking, when I were talking about what Cooper DeJean does on the field, that you really wanted to kind of address in today's video, right?
Yeah, I just, similar to you, I was like, are we really talking about a white cornerback here? But, I've come around to that. All right. And admittedly, in the beginning, didn't watch a ton of Iowa football. But, Erik, as well as a lot of other really smart football people, are like, yeah, this guy can cover too. And I do cover, man-to-man. And that was my big question. Can he do it? And yeah, I want to see Erik's thoughts, but yeah, I think it's there. And I love Erik's perspective of he, started at safety, because that does give you a different way of thinking about things, from going from safety to corner, as opposed to the usual leap, which is corner to safety as really good corners age, right? So I do like that perspective. So yeah, I want to see, I want to hear you expound on it a little bit, Erik, but can this guy be relied upon to cover man-to-man?
I think he can. He wasn't asked to do it a lot at Iowa because of, like I said, because of the scheme. But when you look at his advanced statistics, and I pulled them up for my the draft board that I work off of, and one of the things that I focus on with corners is how often are they in the different coverages, and then how do they grade out in those coverages, right? So with Cooper, he actually grades out very well in man coverage, right? He allows a reception once every 31 and a half passes when he's in man coverage. So that's a really high rate. There's only 3 other corners beyond him that actually, have an average that high. One of them is the top press man guy in a lot of people's minds, Kool-Aid McKinstry. And McKinstry is an excellent press man, and his range is also, I think, in the 30s. I think it's in the high 30s actually. But then you also have a couple of guys that that excel in that as well. Like I think Kamari Lassiter is another guy that's kind of like this, where he gets viewed
Yeah.
as like a heavy zone guy, but his performance when he's in man is actually pretty good. But the difference between a guy like Kamari and Cooper DeJean is that Kamari is more he's more quick, right? He doesn't have like a lot of long speed. Whereas I think like Cooper is the whole package. Cooper has that long speed. His quickness maybe is a tick, it's you could argue it's maybe there's a little bit of a delay, which is, and I think another reason why people are skeptical on his ability to play man. But the instincts are there, the positioning is there, and when he's been in man, like I said, the production is there as well. And so I think the combination of what I was asking him to do, the opportunities for him to get into those situations, I don't think they paint a great picture of what his ceiling is. And he's the type of guy, in my opinion, that you can bring in and immediately you can play him at multiple spots, and he's going to be comfortable in different schemes. And if man takes him a little while to learn, well, that's okay, because you have upgraded the cornerback room and you can give him time.
Yeah, Eric, I was kind of right there with Morgan initially, like really wondering if he could play, a lot of man to man, because the first couple games that I watched of him was Iowa against Ohio State back in 2022 with, CJ Stroud,
Sure.
Marvin Harrison Jr., Jackson Smith and Jigba. So like there was a lot of talent on that Ohio State team. And then I also watched their game against Iowa State, and I kind of made that same observation. Like, okay, he's playing a lot of zone. He's not really challenging a lot of receivers at the line. But the game that did kind of give me hope of like, oh, wait, I think he actually can play this much better than what you see in a lot of other games. He just doesn't get to do it a lot. And don't laugh, but it was the one game that was like, one of the better games that Michigan State played, but it was the Michigan State game where that first half against Iowa, they kind of took advantage of a lot of that off coverage that Iowa plays. And so they were like, well, if you're going to have your corners 8-9 yards off the ball, we're going to run slants, we're going to run these little short routes, and we're going to force your corners to have to cover, come up and tackle in space, but we're still going to take those 5-6 yards, reception type of thing.
Sure.
It was the second half in that game, though, where you see Iowa makes this adjustment where they put Cooper DeJean much more up on the line, and he starts challenging these receivers off the line. Right. And the game completely changes. Noah Kim has like his first half looked really good. His second half looks terrible because now those receivers weren't getting those clean breaks off the line, and he was having to make much more precise throws. So to your point, I do think, he has it in his toolkit. It maybe not be as elite as someone like a Sauce Gardner, but I think it'll be competent enough where a coach like Aaron Glenn wouldn't feel like he's doing his defense a disservice by having Cooper out there manned up on potentially a wide receiver 2 of the opposing team.
Yeah, and you can still operate in man if you don't press him, right? If you keep him in off, you can still have him run man. And so if he's not ready to go press in the NFL, like you can still finesse it with different coverages. But he's physical, like he's a physical guy. Like I absolutely, I think you can put him up on the line and he's going to be okay. The trick is going to be if you press certain receivers in the NFL, they know how to beat it, right? And so then does he have the recovery speed to stick with him, or are you better just putting him off, right? So like with Ohio State, I mean, that Ohio State game, you had first-round quarterback, 3 first-round receivers. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Can you name another Iowa defensive back? Like, I can't. You know what I mean? Like it's just. So like they have to play off. They just have to. That's and they have to hope that DeJean has the range to shut down part of the field, and that's kind of like what their strategy is, right? Like, they utilized the hard thing I think for analysts, right, and just in general, is the college game is so different from the NFL game in a lot of ways, right? And so many times college coaches are just trying to win as opposed to helping, like, they're not trying to draft prep Cooper DeJean. They're not trying to put man coverage on film to help him get a better draft stock. They're trying not to get fired. You know what I mean? Right. So, and you see that like all over the place. The good college coaches can do both, right? They can put a more pro style concepts into their offense, which help feature their players better, and then all of a sudden their players become more. It's easier to understand what they're good at, because you have evidence of it on tape, and look at Michigan, right? They ran a pro style offense. They have 18 players to go to the combine, right? Like look at Ohio State. They run a lot of pro style offense. They had sent 6. It's the same thing. Like these Alabamas, Ohio States, like Michigan.
I was going to say Alabama.
Yeah. They all run these pro style like schemes that help highlight what's best about their players. And so even though DeJean's coming from the Big Ten, from Power 5, he was never highlighted, I think, in a way that showed his full range of what he can do. And the trick for any scout, whether it's a media scout or an NFL scout, is to be able to look at the twists and turns, look at how what the movement skills are, how the instincts are, the positioning, and then see how that might translate into your scheme or just NFL in general. And a lot of those intangibles with DeJean are what make him attractive to me. The positioning, the technique, he's got athleticism. That combination of skills it all screams first rounder to me. And honestly, it's probably top 20 to me. He probably shouldn't be there at 29, which is why I'm saying if he is, it's a bargain.
So I'll ask you both this, and I'll start with you, Morgan. When looking at this cornerback class, we're talking about Cooper DeJean again. Like I said, I feel like he's firmly now, especially after he had his pro day, he's firmly within that top 3, right? Some people like Connor Rogers and Trevor Sikkema have him as their CB1. Eric, I think you and I talked off screen, and you have him as your CB3. Like he's somewhere in that range, and probably shouldn't be too much further below that. But I guess with a question or with a statement like that of having him rated so highly, why is it that we're seeing, at least in a lot of mocks, and I know mocks aren't gospel, but that's kind of what we have to go off of right now, we're still seeing the likes of Quentin Mitchell, Terrion Arnold, even Nate Wiggins kind of go ahead of him? Is that just the fact that he's a white corner, or does that say more about the cornerback class this year, that we're not seeing a corner being talked about even in like the top 10 getting picked? Like I think I've seen most of these corners going off like in the teens,
Yep.
Well, I thought Eric's point was brilliant about like certain schemes obviously doing more of a service for their players than others. And that's, something you definitely have to consider. And Iowa does, they play a lot of cover 3 because they're forced to. They don't really have the athletes to just hang in man-to-man on the outside, which is fair. So yeah, if I trust Brad too, and I know this is kind of a cop-out, but like if Brad takes DeJean at 29 and is cool with it, then shoot, man, I'm cool with it, because he's proven time and time again he identifies these traits that translate well to the league, and almost immediately with a lot of these cases, right? Like up and down the draft board. So yeah, I mean, I'd be sold on it. And yeah, you asked another prospect that's kind of caught my eye, like in a different.
Well, I was more so saying, like, why do you think, do you think this cornerback class is essentially, what do you think of this cornerback class that we're not seeing more corners kind of going in that top 10 range in this year's draft?
I think some of that's right, like just position. Like there's a ton of tackles that are going to go early. There might be a run of 4 or 5 quarterbacks. The receivers are going to go early. So, but yeah, I don't know. It's kind of like the edge, right? Like there might not be a corner or an edge taken until the teens. So I think it's just context, right? Like, but then it could be a really good corner class. I always try to put that little last nugget in there. Like we don't know for sure, but yeah, it could be better. It'd be good for the Lions, right?
No, absolutely. I think a team that like the Lions, who do need a corner, I think if some of these corners start to fall, maybe you have a better chance of getting a good one. But Eric, I mean, yeah, do you think it's like Morgan saying that, like, hey, there's just so many other talented positions ahead of corner that's what's probably going to push this class down a little?
Yeah, this draft class is very offensive, top heavy. 4 quarterbacks are going to go in the top 10. Maybe top 4 if we're being honest.
If we get that trade,
it 100% could happen. The way the quarterbacks are valued, right? So that right there, that cuts almost half of your top 10, right? Like it's 40% of your top 10 off the board, just because of the quarterbacks. You have 3 tackles that are really good. You have three wide receivers that are all arguably top 10, and then all of a sudden the top 10 is empty, right? You have a top 10 tight end that's probably going to go between 10 and 15 because of how tight ends are a bit, they're devalued comparatively to wide receivers. And then you don't have a Sauce in this class. You don't have a Devin Witherspoon in this class. You don't have a Aiden Hutchinson in this class. And because you don't have an elite edge or an elite corner, that tends to push the defense down a little bit. But even though there's no like elite guy pushing for top 10 status, there's still 4 corners that probably go off the board in the first round, maybe 5. And that I think speaks to how the outside of like the top 10, you could easily, I think you might see a run. Like you might see 3 edge and 3 corners all go between 10 and 20, right? Because that's kind of like, now you're going to start to get teams that want defensive players. There's the value of, I could get the top edge, I could get the top corner, right? And so I expect there to be a bit of a defensive run. And then when you get past that, I think it kind of levels out a little bit, like where you have about the same amount of day 2 picks as you normally would, in day 3 too. And so the talent's there. It's just a matter of where it fits in. And at the top, it's really, really top heavy. In my opinion, the corners are better than the edge rushers. The top, like for like Arnold and Mitchell, I think they're better than the edge guys. But the edge guys might go first because of the position, right? Because it's right, and it's like with the quarterback. Like you might see an edge guy go in the top 10, like at 9 or something like that to the Bears, right? But that doesn't mean that they're at that level. They're probably should go in the teens, from a traditional draft value perspective. But you might see the edge. You're probably gonna see the edge guys go first. I think the corners have a little bit of a higher ceiling. Like Mitchell for me is him and Arnold. They're really right there together, facing off. They're more traditional outside guys. And then I have DeJean as 3 because I think there's a little bit of a learning curve. There's a little bit of an unknown because of Iowa's scheme, but he's just as talented. And I think you could argue. I understand the argument that, like you said, a couple of guys have him as CB1. I understand that because of because there's no elite guy. It just might be your flavor, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's the feeling I've been getting from just looking at this corner class, because the guy that I've been beating my drum for, and I'm still just kind of confused on like how he went from being CB1 of this class to being like CB4 or CB5 is Kool-Aid McKinstry, where it's like, I don't see what Kool-Aid has done wrong in his play. I get that he's not nearly as athletic as some of these other guys, but if we're talking about, and I guess that's the other point that you're making, it's all about flavor. But if we're talking about football players, Kool-Aid McKinstry is probably just as much of a football guy as Cooper DeJean is. Am I wrong in that?
No, look, in my tier, the way I rank my guys is I rank them in tiers. My top tier is Arnold and Mitchell. My second tier is DeJean and Kool-Aid. That's my second tier. So I rank them both where I'm like, you could argue one is better than the other, and I would understand it, because in my mind, McKinstry has a lot of intangibles that make a ton of sense as well, right? Like you don't start for Saban as a freshman unless you're highly intelligent, right? Like there's a guy who has showed us that, that, right? And Brian Branch, and showed us that works. Like, and you can look at that. Don't sleep on the guy who starts for Saban as a freshman. It's silly.
Yeah.
Now, why has his production, or why has his value dropped? I think it's because, one, he didn't elevate at the arc that he was in his first 2 seasons. He was arcing really high. And that happens a lot. That happens a lot with corners, with college corners that start as freshmen. They peak real fast as freshmen. As sophomores, they take off, and then they level out as third-year guys. Because that's as far as like the college coaches can take them. And
The
so
LSU
we've kind of
corner.
seen this. Like
Yeah,
the kid that's in Houston, right?
Stingley.
Derek
Stingley.
Stingley. Yeah.
It's the same thing. He was
Yep,
the
you're
best
right.
corner in college football when he was a freshman.
As a freshman, you're
The
right.
best.
That's a great point.
And by
That's
the time he got to a junior, people were like,
is he
he's
that
not
good?
No, of course he's that good. Like he's always been this good.
It's a great point. Yeah.
So with McKinstry, he didn't get worse. He just didn't continue that arc.
Yeah.
And so and then you have his running mate on the opposite side that is developing at a high arc because he hasn't been starting as long, and he's showing a lot of athleticism and he's showing a lot of growth, and that growth is appealing to teams and it's appealing to analysts, and so he's gonna be a little bit higher. But Kool-Aid still has a lot of those same skills. The question with him is, Alabama has good coaches. Were they just tapped out in what they could teach him? Or can we pull more? Whereas you look at Arnold and you're like, man, he's still raw. I can still mold him. I can still do this. And so that's why he's he's technically, quote unquote, more appealing. But Kool-Aid is still a first round talent. And if he's there at 29, he's going to be absolutely in the mix. And so, yeah, I have those two guys right there, right next to each other, DeJean and Kool-Aid for me.
See, and I've been beating the drum again. I think things like since the college season ended, like just go out and get another number one wearing jersey player from Alabama, and let's just kind of keep this 3 year. Yeah, right. It's worked out really well for the Lions. I love the fact that you guys both kind of brought up Brian Branch being a player that again that was kind of overlooked, but again had all the intangibles and everything that said on tape. And basically everywhere that like, listen, this should be a first round draft pick. But we saw a player that was, again, everything said first round draft pick, but still fall to the second round. Are either of you concerned that the same thing could possibly happen to a player like Cooper DeJean, where everything on the tape, everything athletically says,
oh, sure,
he should be a first round draft pick, but people are not going to be able to get past the pigmentation and be like, or not even maybe not even the pigmentation, but because so many teams want to move him to safety or slot that he falls to the second round.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I'm going to jump in here quick, Morgan, and then I'll let you. I don't want to cut you off, but 100%. Like there's going to be teams that look at Nate Wiggins and be like, man, his cover skills are so good that he's going to be CB3. Like he's better than DeJean. Maybe he's better than one of the other top two guys that most people like. But Wiggins doesn't fit Detroit as well as DeJean does, right? Sure. Wiggins is a great cover player, and he's going to fit really well in teams that look for that. But he doesn't tackle. He's not very physical. And there are other intangibles about his game that I think just don't suit the Lions as well. Wiggins is a terrific player, but I don't think he's going to fit the Lions. And so you're going to see the opposite with other teams. You're going to see other teams that are going to say Wiggins is great, but DeJean doesn't quite fit us right. And so DeJean could absolutely start to slide. But I don't think he gets past 29. Like I don't think he'll make it to the second round because I don't think he would get past 29. I think he fits so well with what the Lions do that from a grit standpoint, from a mentality standpoint, from a positional versatility, like everything that he does it just slides in beautifully. It would surprise me to see him drop, but I could absolutely see NFL teams just passing on him because he's not as slick or polished, and he doesn't fit their scheme the way that that Wiggins does. Right. So.
Yeah, I think that's all it really boils down to. I liked what Erik said too, like with, it's really your flavor at the top too, like in terms of like, what do you want? Like when you're drafting a corner, like, they all have different skill sets. They all can, especially initially. Right. But I will say the Lions trust their coaching staff, man. You see that time and time again. They take some of these players and the arc is long. Like it takes a while to get there, but we have a couple examples now, right? You have Derek Barnes, Ifeatu Melifonwu, JMO. I know that's some of it was circumstantial, but also coaching. Like he got a lot better. Like Antoine Randall is a good football coach.
Yeah.
So I trust that if they see that in DeJean and they think it can translate, or if they see that with Kool-Aid And, I love that the Lions hopefully they do it again with Inside the Den, but do you remember some of those scenes during when they were like interviewing the players and like having them like walk them through plays? And I'm sure they grilled Kool-Aid man just to see like, hey, what, draw us up some schemes real quick. What would you do against this? Like, where are you going to be here? And I think if they think that's a good fit and they can coach him up, then got to trust them at this point because there's proof in the pudding.
Yeah, that's great points by both of you. And I mean, again, with the draft being a little over a week away, we'll finally get our answer as to what the Lions decide to do, as well as what every other team decides to do. Because Eric, to your point, and Morgan, you as well, with everybody like having so many different preferences and not knowing what teams are going to highlight or prefer more in their defensive schemes, we really don't know where any of these corners could fall. And I think that, again, kind of really does play into the favor of the Lions, because I do think if corner is a priority for them, if that is the best player that's on their board, I think they have a really good chance to get a good one. Whether it's, the fourth or fifth, rated running back or quarterback in the class, I think they could still really get a good one. So, Eric, appreciate you taking the time to come out, hang out with me and Morgan, and really just have a really fun, spirited conversation, a little bit about the draft, but mostly about Cooper DeJean. And again, hopefully educated a lot of other people in the audience who maybe weren't as high on Cooper DeJean like Morgan and I were when we first started this conversation.
Yeah, look, I'm happy. Like I have a lot of opinions, so I appreciate you allowing me to share one of them.
All right, guys. Well, that's going to pretty much do it for this video. We appreciate you guys taking the time to stop by and consume all this content. If you are looking for more Lions content, you can always check out pridedetroit.com. We are always uploading new articles and breaking new news over there, even if that includes blurry images of what the New Jersey could look like. We might even talk about that occasionally. But if you want to see more from Eric, like I said, you can go check out the website. He's always uploading articles over there, whether it's a mock draft or just any news. And like I said earlier, you can check out his podcast, Detroit Lions Breakdown, basically wherever you find podcasts. And be sure to go over there and support him, not just the episodes with the POD crew, but also the episodes with him and Joe, because they deserve your love and your support too. Also, be sure to
be
subscribe.
A smart football fan for it, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. So also be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell here over on the YouTube channel. That way we can continue to grow and provide you guys with great content. And yeah, that's pretty much going to do it. So with that said, I'm Miko, he's Morgan, and he's Eric. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch.